محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وما خلقنا السماء والأرض وما بينهما وما خلقنا السماء والأرض وما بينهما باطلا ذلك ظن الذين كفروا فويل للذين كفروا من النار. أم نجعل الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات كالمفسدين وعملوا الصالحات كالمفسدين في الأرض أم نجعل المتقين كالفجار. كتاب أنزلته إليك مبارك ليدبروا آياته وليذكر أولي الألباب. وهبنا لداود سليمان نعم العبد إنه أواب إذ أوز عليه بالعشي الصفانات العباد. فقال إني أحببت حب الخير عن ذكر ربي حب الخير عن ذكر ربي حتى تورات بالحجاب. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه. This ayat tonight is from Surah Sad, ayah number 27 to ayah number 31. And there's an important message in it. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that you think that we have created the sama, the skies and earth, zameen, and whatever is in between them by mistake, or it's just something bottle. And no, we have created this, and this is the zan, this is the doubt of kuffar. And that's why the kuffar, they should wait for Jahannam and for punishment, because they're taking my creation as false, which is not true. And I have sent the kitab, and in this kitab we're telling you what to do. We tell the mufsideen to quit that and don't do any fasad in the earth, and use this kitab as a guidance. Uh, it's interesting that different surah in the Quran over and over, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that we have created this creation, this earth and the skies and everything for a purpose. And you have the duty to take this and announce it to people. And in many places it says your only duty is to get this message to people. You're not responsible. They can choose to guide themselves to Jannah or to the Duzakh or Nar or the hell. So again, I was told by someone who's very familiar with Quran that it says that when you get this message, be persistent and do your best to follow it. And those people who actually summa istaqamu, they do, they do their best to stay in this path. Those are the ones that they would get to Jannah and they get rewards. So, inshallah, we need to be a student of Quran and be familiar with different verses of Quran and be able to use it, because oftentimes we might get questioned about different verses of Quran, and even teach those to our children, not only to read it, but also follow it and take lessons from it and use that in their life. That tonight is, we are second day of Rajab, and 3 weeks has passed quickly since Safar. I'm sorry, Safar. Yeah, the second day of Safar, and we have 3 weeks past Ashura and Muharram, 10th of Muharram. And as you see, 5 weeks ago we were worried about how to put the black on the walls and get ready for Muharram, and now 5 weeks later, we're getting quickly closer to Arba'in, and there are, like I said last week, people who are coming far away from Russia, from Iran, from Pakistan, walking to Arba'in because it has a great meaning for them. Is just something that I was reading today that even Imams would. This is a tradition that A'immah would do in their life. Starting with Imam Sajjad. So, inshallah, we asked Imam Zaman on this Friday to keep us in his du'as and help us as Az-Zahra Imam Husain and accept our prayers and du'as, and inshallah we'll be worthy of being Az-Zahra Imam Husain alayhi salam. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil faraj.
Bar Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the love of the Holy Prophet and his holy family, please recite the second salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the reappearance of our awaited Savior, please recite another salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil faraj. The salam and marsiya that I have tonight, this represents the time when the family of the Holy Prophet has been taken as prisoners to the court of Yazid. So the salam and marsiya tries to depict these scenes. Bar Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil faraj. शाम में दाखिला है ज़ैनब का याली सर खुला है ज़ैनब का याली सर खुला है ज़ैनब का ہے رسن میں گلا سکینہ کا اور بازو بندھا ہے زینب کا اور بازو بندھا ہے زینب کا کرسیوں پر ہے سب تماشائی اور کنبا کھڑا ہے زینب کا اور کنبا کھڑا ہے زینب کا تشت میں دیکھ کر سرے شبیر ٹکڑے دل ہو گیا ہے زینب کا ٹکڑے دل ہو گیا ہے زینب کا یاد عباس میں ہر ایک لمحہ ہر قدم مرثیہ ہے زینب کا ہر قدم مرثیہ ہے زینب کا کیا بیاں کر سکوں گا میں ساحل قتل کب کب ہوا ہے زینب کا قتل کب کب ہوا ہے زینب کا شام میں داخلہ صلوات اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد محشر کی صبح آج نمایاں ہے شام میں کنبا شفیع حشر کا ہے اجتحام میں سر ننگے روئے فاطمہ ہے اہتمام میں خاصان ذوالجلال ہے بلوائے عام میں جبریل کی قزادیاں تشریف لائی ہے مشکل کشا کی بیٹیاں بندی میں آئی ہے مشکل کشا کی بیٹیاں بندی میں آئی ہے بیچ میں کھلے ہوئے آلے ابا کے سر نیزوں پر ان کے گرد ہیں فوج خدا کے سر بچوں کے سر بزرگوں کے سر اقربا کے سر روتے ہیں وارثوں کے سروں کو دکھا کے سر کے زانوؤں پر جو وارث کو روتے ہیں ظالم سروں پر نیزوں کی نوکیں چبوتے ہیں ظالم سروں پر نیزوں کی نوکیں چبوتے ہیں ناگاہ ہوا یزید کا دروازہ آشکار حاضر نقیب و حاجب و دربان و چوبدار تیغ علم کیے ہوئے جلاد نابکار مجرائی بے حساب تماشائی بے شمار ایوان میں بھی رقص کا ساما تمام تھا پر انتظار عطرت خیر الانام تھا پر انتظار عطرت خیر الانام تھا بولے سب ایک بار وہ آئے گناہ گار آئے قصوروار وہ آئے گناہ گار جلاد ہوشیار وہ آئے گناہ گار وہ آئے بے دیار وہ آئے گناہ گار جب سے کہ آسمان خدا نے بنائے ہیں آلے رسول آج ہی بندی میں آئے ہیں آلے رسول آج ہی بندی میں آئے ہیں روکا عمر نے بڑھ کے علم کو سپاہ کو مجرا پرا جما کے کیا بارگاہ کو اور ہنس کے دیکھا آلے رسالت پناہ کو، آواز دی نبی رے شیر الہ کو، ہاں ہاں مہار روکنا اونٹوں کا تھامنا، اب ہے یزید کے در دولت کا سامنا، اب ہے یزید کے در دولت کا سامنا، پہنچے مراد کو سفر اپنا تمام ہے، اترو اسیرو اترو ادب کا مقام ہے، آگے تو آستان سلطان شام ہے، دیکھو تو کیا جلال ہے کیا احتشام ہے، اس کی ولا میں عرش کو ہم نے ہلا دیا، گھر پنجے تن کا خاک میں بالکل ملا دیا، گھر پنجے تن کا خاک میں بالکل ملا دیا، سننا یہ تھا کہ سب کے جگر پر چھری چلی، اونٹوں سے اتری بیبیاں کہہ کے یا علی، آنکھیں پھرا کے رہ گئی بانوں کی لاڈلی، روح حسین کو ہوئی جنت میں بے کلی، طاقت بدن کی گھٹ گئی اور ذوف بڑھ گیا، اترے جو بے سہارے تو دم سب کا چڑھ گیا، اترے جو بے سہارے تو دم سب کا چڑھ گیا، سینے میں دم ابھی نہ سمائے تھے ہے غضب، جو آئے ریس مالیے ہاتھوں میں بے ادب، گھبرا کے پوچھا بیووں نے تجویز کیا ہے اب، بولا عمر کے مجلس حاکم میں ہے طلب، منظور ہے کہ روح علی پھر ملول ہو، مجمع میں رو بکاری آل رسول ہو، مجمع میں رو بکاری آل رسول ہو، مظلومیت سے روکے یہ مظلوموں نے کہا، حاکم کی یہ خوشی ہے تو پھر عذر ہم کو کیا، بازار میں تو پھر چکے بے مقنع و ردا، آسان کرے گا مشکل دربار بھی خدا، حاضر ہے لے چلو ہمیں گمراہ لے چلو، سر پر نہیں حسین جہاں چاہے لے چلو، سر پر نہیں حسین جہاں چاہے لے چلو، کچھ اب بھی اوڑھنے کے لیے دو گے یا نہیں، حاکم کا سامنا ہے سروں پر ردا نہیں، لائے ہو اپنے شہر میں یہ بھی حیا نہیں، کیسے عرب ہو تم کو حمیت ذرا نہیں، سیدانیوں کے کچھ تو مدارات چاہیے، چادر بجائے ہدیہ و سوغات چاہیے، چادر بجائے ہدیہ و سوغات چاہیے، وہ بولے اب قبول کوئی التجا نہیں، سب سے حیا ہے پر ہمیں تم سے حیا نہیں، حاکم کے دشمنوں پر ترہم روا نہیں، مجرم کو احتیاج لباس و ردا نہیں، آلودہ وارثوں کے لہو سے جبیں تو ہے، چہروں پر خاک لگا لو زمیں تو ہے، چہروں پر خاک لگا لو زمیں تو ہے، پر اتنا ٹھہرو وارثوں کے سر سے پوچھ لے، شاہ امم کے فرق منور سے پوچھ لے، دربار جانے کو علی اکبر سے پوچھ لے، عباس ابن حیدر صفدر سے پوچھ لے، مردہ نہ سمجھو زندہ یہ حیدر کے پیارے ہیں، مختار ہم نہیں ہیں یہ مالک ہمارے ہیں، مختار ہم نہیں ہیں یہ مالک ہمارے ہیں. نیزوں پر نصب تھے جو شہیداؤں کے سر تمام، زینب نے بڑھ کے بھائی کے سر کو کیا سلام. چلائی کیوں زبی ہے خدا شاہ تشنا کام، مرضی ہے کیا حضور کی کہتے ہیں کیا امام. دربار مٹ گیا تیرا خورن میں بہہ گیا، میرے لیے یزید کا دربار رہ گیا، میرے لیے یزید کا دربار رہ گیا. نام یزید سن کے جو بچے دہلتے ہیں، سجاد سر جھکائے ہوئے ہاتھ ملتے ہیں. بولو حسین بولو کہ اب دم نکلتے ہیں، آئی ندا کہ تم بھی چلو ہم بھی چلتے ہیں، آئی ندا کہ تم بھی چلو ہم بھی چلتے ہیں. اس دم جو سر کھلے ہوئے دربار جاؤ گی، امت کو بخشوانے کو محشر میں آؤ گی، امت کو بخشوانے کو محشر میں آؤ گی. صلوات اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرج. Please get ready for Maghrib and prayers. در محمد وآل محمد صلوات اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل.
But then you cannot even control it. It's not in the control.
Only thing they recommend if you are tired, you just lower the window. So
That's
fresh air.
Mm. 49.
Is the alarm going to be here or see? I don't know that.
जी हाँ
Did you reply to that?
Unrelated.
You just go and do it.
They asked me what you asked me. I pretend I didn't hear what you mentioned, that you're not predisposed, you're not, compromise. I said, no, neither of them, but I said, I'm traveling overseas, and I'm just here. She said, you just talk. I said, well, I would say that I didn't know about it.
Because my friend,
बर मोहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद सलवात अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मोहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद बिस्मिल्लाहिर रहमानिर रहीम इन्नल्लाह व मलाइकतहु युसल्लूना अलन नबी या अय्युहल्लज़ीना आमनू सल्लु अलैहि व सल्लिमू तस्लीमा अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मोहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद Subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah wallahu akbar walillahil hamd. Allahu akbar, Allahu akbar. الله أكبر الله أكبر جل جلاله وجل شانه. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليا ولي الله ووصي رسول الله وخليفته بلا فصل. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليا حجة الله عليه الصلاة والسلام. هيا على الصلاة هيا على الصلاة هيا على الفلاح هيا على الفلاح هيا على خير العمل هيا على خير العمل. الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات تاب بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات إنك مجيب الدعوات إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. صلاة المغرب النفس صلاة المسلمين. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأرفع وأسجد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. كذلك الله ربي. الله أكبر. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. يا كريم يا رحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الحمد لله وخير الأسماء لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأرقى وأسجد. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمد. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمد. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف. الله أكبر. الحمد لله وخير الأسماء لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعجل.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك ونجاة من النار ومن كل بلية والفوز بالجنة والرضوان في دار السلام وجوار نبيك محمد عليه وآله السلام. اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك لا إله إلا أنت. أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الحمد لله شكرا.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير الأمل حي على خير الأمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. ما صلاته بقصر إن شاء الله. صلاة العشاء. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأرقى وأسجد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. كذلك الله ربي. الله أكبر. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. يا كريم يا رحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله وخير الأسماء لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. تقبل شفاعته في أمته وارفع درجته. السلام عليكم النبي ورحمة الله. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله الله الله.
الله أكبر استغفر الله.
السلام عليكم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما
اللهم صل على محمد وآل
محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد
وآل
وآل
محمد
اللهم صل على
محمد وآل محمد وعجل.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إنه ليس لي علم بموضع رزقي وإنما أطلبه بخطرات تخطر على قلبي فأجول في طلبه البلدان فأنا فيما أنا طالب كالحيران لا أدري أفي سهل هو أم في جبل أم في أرض أم في سماء أم في بر أم في بحر وعلى يدي من ومن قبل من وقد علمت أن علمه عندك وأسبابه بيدك وأنت الذي تقسمه بلطفك وتسببه برحمتك. اللهم فصل على محمد وآله واجعل يا ربي رزقك لي واسعا ومطلبه سهلا ومأخذه قريبا ولا تعنني بطلب ما لم تقدر لي فيه رزقا فإنك غني عن عذابي وأنا فقير إلى رحمتك. فصل على محمد وآله وجد على عبدك بفضلك إنك ذو فضل عظيم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إلهي عزم بلاء وبرح الخفاء وانكشف الغطاء وانقطع الرجاء وزاقت الأرض ومنعت السماء وأنت المستعان وإليك المشتكى وعليك المعول في شدة والرخاء. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد أولي الأمر الذي فرضت علينا طاعتهم وعرفتنا بذلك منزلتهم ففرج عنا بحقهم فرجا عاجلا قريبا كلمح البصر أو هو أقرب يا محمد يا علي يا علي يا محمد اكفياني فإنكما كافيان وانصراني فإنكما ناصران يا مولانا يا صاحب الزمان الغوث 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 أدركني 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 الساعة 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 العجل 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 برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين بحق محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه.
السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين وابن سيد الوسيين، السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين، السلام عليكم سائر شهداء كربلاء خصوصا سيدي مولاي أبا الفضل العباس يا ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء، السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء، السلام عليك يا سلطان يا أبا الحسن يا علي ابن موسى أيها الرضا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب الأسر والزمان، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسعل الله تعالى مخرجك وزهورك. السلام عليك وعلى آبائك الطيبين الطاهرين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على محمد.
How are you? How are you getting Salam कैसे हैं खैरियत से साहब कैसे हैं खैरियत से
आपका सफर कैसा है?
खुदा का शुक्र बहुत अच्छा थोड़ा सा साल कैसे हैं खैरियत
Thank you so much for coming.
it's an honor it's an absolute honor
Thank you.
catch up inshallah you're like
محمد وعلى محمد الصلوات
For the departed souls of your marhumin and for our marhumin and for the departed soul of Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Sa'id Al-Hakim, Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Malik yawm al-Din. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فوضوا أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير. والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أم حسبت أن أصحاب الكهف والرقيم كانوا من آياتنا عجبا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. زينوا مجالسكم بالصلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Iman here in Kansas City or across the globe, wherever you're hearing my voice, Salamun alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question: how does one develop a community in the modern age? Keep this question in the back of your mind, inshallah, we will return to it. We are told, according to narrations, on a night like this, after Karbala, after the tragedy of Karbala, the holy household, the holy family of the Imam is being paraded from city to city. They are being moved from Karbala onto Kufa and then onto Sham. And there is a moment in time in the bazaar of Kufa, we are told, where the heads are on the spears of the shuhada. The heads of Qasim, the head of Ali Akbar, the heads of the Imam himself. And in that moment in time, you find a particular moment in time, if you were in that bazaar, you would see one head that was on the spear amongst the other heads. And if you were there in that bazaar at that moment in time, you would have seen the lips of this head moving. And at that particular time, if you were there and you put your ear close to that head, at that moment in time, you would have heard some recitation. But what would you have heard? कह दो ये शाम वालों से कुछ देर चुप रहें, अल्लाह सुन रहा है तिलावत हुसैन से. The poet says that Imam al-Husain alayhi salam's blessed head is reciting the Holy Quran in the bazaar. At that point in time, if you were there, what was he reciting? Was he reciting the verses of Surah Al-Hamd? No, although the verses of Surah Al-Hamd are amazing. Was he reciting Surah Nas? No, although they're very amazing. Was he reciting Surah Yasin? No, although Surah Yasin is very high. He was reciting particular verses. Which verses was he reciting? According to the narrations and according to the ulama, he was reciting the verses of Surah Al-Kahf. Why? What was the reason? From Karbala, from Medina onto Mecca, and from Mecca onto Karbala, Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam does not show an apparent miracle or mu'jiza or karama. Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam is that individual that if he wanted to, in one moment, if he touches the ground, he can have water. No, he does not even need to touch the ground, he can have water at any moment. But he did not use the miracle of imamat to show a mu'jiza, a karama at that moment. At what moment did Allah decree that a mu'jiza, a karama is shown? He says in the bazaar. To wake up the hearts, the Imam is reciting the verses of the Quran. The question that I want to ask here is, what is the wisdom within this blessed chapter? What is the wisdom within these verses? Why is the Imam alluding to this? Because everything that the Imam does is a hujjah. If the Imam speaks, it's a hujjah. If the Imam remains silent, it's a hujjah. If the Imam picks a particular verse, there's a lesson for you and I in it. What is that lesson? Therefore, in the brief moments that we have together, I want to look at a few things. Number one, what is the wisdom that we can derive from these Quranic verses? As in, why the story of Ashab al-Kahf? Why the chapter of Ashab al-Kahf? Why these verses? Why did Allah mention it? Were Ashab al-Kahf many in number or were they a small number? This is a question to think about. When it comes to Ashab al-Kahf, was it that they were, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was looking at numbers? Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala invite the Imam to recite these verses? That's one. Number two, what is the history of the Imams? And if you and I want to summarize what the Imams stood for, whether it was Imam Ali or Imam Hassan or Imam Husain or the Imams afterwards, what did they stand for? Is the Husayni movement disconnected from the movement of Imam Hassan, the Hassani movement? Or are they connected? Is the movement of Imam Hassan connected to the movement of Imam Sajjad, or are they disconnected? We need to answer this question. Number 3, what is the history of Majalis? What is the history of the Azza of Sayyid al-Shuhada? The style of Majalis, the style of the Azza of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Where did that come from? What's the history behind it? How can that give you and I a lesson? At the 4th level, what is the modern challenge of our modern world? What challenges are we facing for today's generation, for today's world, for the next 5, 10, 15 years? What is the major issues that we need to face as a community and as community leaders? And everyone here before me and whoever's hearing my voice is a community leader, either today or tomorrow. And finally, what lessons can we learn from the movement of Imam al-Husain and Imam Sajjad and Sayyidah Zainab before, during, and after Karbala that can give us guidance into how we should live in our world today? This is our agenda for the brief moments that we have together. Wherever you are, here in Kansas City or across the globe, send a salawat on Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli. At the first level, when we come to the movements of the Imams, oftentimes we as followers of the Ahlul Bayt, we focus on Karbala and Imam Husain a lot, and alhamdulillah we should. In fact, that's not even enough. We should be doing more. But alhamdulillah we do that. But one thing that we need to make sure we know is that the movement of Imam al-Husain alayhi salam is not disconnected from the movement of Imam Hassan. Imam Hassan's movement is the same movement as Imam Husain. The movement of Imam Husain is the same movement as Imam Sajjad. All of the Imams were united in this movement. In fact, our scholars say, if Imam Hassan was in the place of Imam Husain, he would have done the exact same thing. And vice versa. Why is this important? Because oftentimes we come forward and say, when we see the movement of Imam Husain, we think we have to pick up a sword and go to the battlefield. When we see the movement of Imam Husain, we think that we have to be revolutionaries all the time. But when you look at the scope of all of the Imams and you put the picture together and the puzzle together, you begin to realize that there was something else that was common amongst them. They all had a common goal. And what was that common goal? According to the ulama, the common goal of the Imams and Rasulullah and Imam Ali all the way to the Imam of our time was Hifzuddin wa Hifzuddima. Hifzuddin wa Hifzuddima. Meaning what? Preservation. Preserving the deen, preserving the religion, and preserving dima. Dima meaning blood. Blood of who? Blood of the believers, blood of the faithful. Hifz, preservation. You know, someone who is a hafiz, they preserve the verses, they do hifz of the Quran, they say, right? They preserve the verses of the Quran. The methodology of all of the Imams was the same. To do hifzuddin wa hifzuddima. Preserve the deen and preserve the blood of the people who follow the deen. Preserving the faith and preserving the faithful. Meaning what? They were focused on making sure that Islam is protected and the mu'mineen are protected. Believe it or not, whether it was the time of Imam Ali or Imam Hassan or Imam Sajjad or Imam Sadiq or Imam Rida, any Imam, they were actually trying to minimize bloodshed, not maximize it. They were trying to save lives. So when Imam Hassan alayhi salam came forward, he was trying to protect the religion but also save the lives of the believers. When we come to the Imam Husain's time, there were 72 companions. There were more than this, but this is what has become common and we've heard. But these companions, at the most, if you combine with the family of Imam al-Husain, maybe 100, 110, 120, whatever that number was, Imam was trying to minimize the amount of people that died. So when we look at the movement was actually to protect the religion and to protect the deen and the believers. Therefore, in every single Imam's zaman and makan, their time and space, their challenges were different and their approach to tackle the challenges were different. So if you come to the time of Imam Sajjad after Imam al-Husain, after the tragedy of Karbala, Imam Sajjad didn't pick up the sword. Imam Sajjad used du'as. He used the Risalatul Huquq, that is the treaties of right. He used Sahifa Sajjadiyah, the du'as that are there. And in the usage of those du'as, through those du'as, he was able to share the teachings of Shiaism and also preserve the faith and the lives of the faithful. You come to the time of Imam Baqir, Imam As-Sadiq. This was a time where they were able to propagate, and they used the University of Medina in order to spread the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt. You go to the time of Imam Al-Kadhim. Imam Al-Kadhim is in prison for a vast majority of his life, of his imamah. But he's still spreading the message. Imam Rida as well. He's the heir apparent of the ruler, but still he's doing the same thing. Hifzuddin, Hifzuddima. What are the challenges that you and I are facing? We need to think about this. At the next level, how did Majalis emerge? What were the things that were addressed in Majalis? What were the things that were addressed in our Husainiyas and our Imam Bargas? And is it possible that the environment impacts what we address? Of course, we need to do the zikr of Ahlul Bayt. We need to do the zikr of the Quran. We need to do the zikr of Allah. No doubt about it. But you will find that whether you realize it or not, our environment impacts us and influences us. I'll give you an example. When we look at the history at the next level of Majalis, you will notice when Majalis has emerged from Sayyida Zainab in Sham, we are told then they went on after Sham, then they went to the Arba'in, the family. And eventually when they got back to Medina, Imam Sajjad and Bibi Zainab used to do a Majlis every day in Medina. Bibi Zainab would do one for the ladies and Imam Sajjad would do one for the men's. But when this movement of the Imam Barga and the Husainiya and the Azab Sayyid al-Shuhada moved away from Hijaz, that is the western bank of modern day Saudi Arabia, from Mecca and Medina, it went on to Iraq, it went on to the greater Arab nations, then it migrated and moved on to the Persian world. And from the Persian world it moved on to the Indian subcontinent. Did Majalises change? I'll give you an example. Let's take a country, Pakistan. Pakistan is an interesting country at a geopolitical level. Why? Because geopolitically, Pakistan as a Muslim country, it has the highest, second highest number of Sunnis in their country, in Pakistan. After Indonesia, the second highest number. And in the same country, it has the second highest number of Shias as a percentage. In the same country. Second highest Sunni, second highest Shia. India also has a very high percentage, but not as a Muslim country. After Indonesia, the second highest population in Pakistan of Sunnis. After Iran, the second highest population of Shias under one roof. If you go back to the history and you study the Deoband school in India, which was a very extremist or very what we in our modern day would call Salafist or Wahhabi narrative of Islam, and responses began to emerge at that time. So in an environment like Pakistan, where everyone is predominantly already Muslim, the minorities are very small in number. The minorities, you have some Hindus, some Sikhs and some others, but they're a fraction of the general population. Everyone under the roof is Muslim. At least they're saying La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. So when it's a Muslim environment, is everyone debating on Allah? No, everyone already believes in Allah. Do they believe or do they debate on Rasulullah? There's no debate on Rasulullah. Everyone already accepts Rasulullah. So where does the debate emerge? The debate emerges on Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali. Who is the Khalifa bila fasal? Who is the one who inherited Rasulullah? Who is the successor of Rasulullah? Therefore, the style of majalises that were established was to respond to opposition in my surrounding, to establish that Ali is the Khalifa bila fasal. And he is, of course. There's no doubt in the fadail of Ali, and we must say this as much as possible. For 90 years, Amir al-Mu'mineen was cursed by the Umayyas in Muawiyah's time and after. But there was an impact of the society on Majalis. Now let's go further. Let's go to the Persian world. In the Persian world, especially after the Safavid dynasty, there's two theories. Definitely after the Safavid dynasty, but before that, they're said during the time of Alam al-Halli. The story goes that the ruler, remember this thing, if you have money and power, you can change the dynamics of society. This is in every religion throughout times. For example, you may say, how did England become Anglican? England, if you go to the country of England, they follow the Anglican church. What happened? The ruler at that time, the country was Catholic at the time. He wanted to divorce his wife. When he wanted to divorce his wife at that point in time, the church said, no, you cannot do this, it's not allowed. He said, I have no need for you, I'll start my own church. They started their own church, and the whole country till this day follows the Anglican faith, although there's separation of church and state. We're told at a moment in time, the ruler in Iran at that point in time, as you know, the history, most of the scholars of Ahlul Sunnah were actually historically part of the Persian world, like Imam Bukhari, Muslim, Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah. Many of these people were from the greater Persia at that time. Bukhara is in modern day Uzbekistan, which was part of the greater Persia at that time. During the time of the second Khalifa, Umar, that time, according to historians, that's when they conquered Persia. And believe me that they did a lot of dhulm. You cannot sugarcoat history. What happened during the time of some of these khulafa is a tragedy. I'll give you an example. We are told, historians say that during the time of the second Khalifa, they conquered over Alexandria, Egypt. They conquered Egypt. When they conquered Egypt, under the domain of Egypt was the Library of Alexandria. Today, the largest library in the world is the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. At that time, the largest library in the world was the Library of Alexandria. All of the knowledge was there. At that point in time, when they conquered over the Library of Alexandria, they said, this is the largest database of knowledge in the world. What do we do with it? The second Khalifa comes forward, according to the historians, and he comes forward and says, if there is anything in this library that is against the Quran, it is bid'ah, innovation. And if there is something in this library that is with the Quran, it is repetitive, it is redundant. Burn the whole library. This is what happened in Muslim history. You can't sugarcoat it. In fact, historians say that when they conquered over Persia, there was a beautiful, because as you know, Persia was a big civilization historically. There's no doubt about it, according to all historians. They had a beautiful carpet, a beautiful rug that their artisans had made. And whatever angle the light used to hit this, it had a different color. For example, purple, green, orange. Whatever light hit that, it would have a beautiful color. But that is when the carpet and the rug was together. As you know, they're still known for beautiful rugs. When the rugs would be hit by different light, different color would emerge. They said, we've conquered over this land. What should we do? What should we do with this beautiful rug? The second Khalifa has come forward and said, hold on. I know what to do. Cut it up into pieces and give one piece to each of the people who are the conquerors. You cut it up, what is the value of it anymore? The light it's these things happened in Muslim history. You cannot sugarcoat it. According to historians, there's two elements. When the Safavid dynasty happened, definitely after that, but even before that, during the time of Allama Hilli, the ruler, he wanted to divorce his wife. In a rage, he was in Sunni Islam at that time. In a rage, he said the word talaq, divorce in Islam, 3 times very fast. You know, sometimes people get angry and then they lose it and they say it very quickly. Talaq, talaq, talaq. Of course, in our fiqh, in our view, it doesn't work like that. You can't just say it 3 times and it happens. It doesn't work that way. At that point in time, when he said this 3 times, he asked all of his scholars, look, last night I got very upset at my wife and I said this 3 times. So all of the scholars of Ahlul Sunnah at the time came forward and said, look, according to our fiqh, according to our rulings, according to our jurisprudence, you said it 3 times, that means she's divorced. Meaning, she has to marry someone else and then marry you after that. Divorce that person and then come back. He said, no way, I will not have this happen. So he asked around, is there anyone who can solve this problem and dilemma? They said there's one individual who's the Imam or the scholar of the Rafadi. Rafadi was the term for the rejectors, the ones who reject the first 3 Khulafa. That's Shias, they would say that. So they said, there's this one, they call him Allama Hilli. The Shias call him Allama Hilli. So they called him. At that moment in time, Allama Hilli comes into the court. When he comes into the court, he said, this is the situation. Look, I was angry. The ruler says, I was angry. Last night, 3 times I said, divorce, 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 talaq, talaq, talaq to my wife. And then I divorced her. And they're saying that I need to go through this long process and I'm not going to do that. What's the solution? He said, what happened? You only divorced her once. So what do you mean? He gave a beautiful dalil. He said, when you said talaq the first time, you divorced her. When you said talaq the second time, divorce the second time, you are saying it to someone who's already divorced from you. So it's like walking down the street and just saying talaq to a random lady. You have no connection with that lady. So that means that's not the second divorce anyways. So it doesn't apply. So you've only divorced her once. He said, this makes sense to me. And at that point in time, there was some sensitivity towards Shiaism that emerged at that time. But nonetheless, after the Safavid dynasty, it's very clear. In the last 400, 500, 600 years, it was very clear that it became Shia. So if you come to a place like Iran, is there any debate on Allah? Yes, in some circles they may be, but generally everyone's Shia, everyone's Muslim. So there's no debate on Allah historically. Now, of course, in the last century or two, there may be. Like this is happening globally everywhere. Is there any debate on Allah? Not necessarily, no. Is there any debate on Rasulullah? No. If you have a 96, 97, 98% Shia, who's going to debate on this? When you come to the 3rd level, is there any debate on Imam Ali? Not necessarily. Everyone believes in Imam Ali. What are you going to debate about? So then what is the issue? Sometimes the issues that get addressed are other things, maybe issues that arise, like who's your marja and these types of things emerge. Why am I saying this? In the world in which you and I live, what are the issues you and I are facing? What are the challenges you and I are facing? And are they being addressed from our mimbar and our Husainiyas? The questions that you and I need to ask is, will there be anyone here down the road? And are we making sure we are addressing the challenges that are being faced by our youth today and down the road? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli. At the next level, I remember I was in a gathering in the United States of 50 of the community leaders of our community, from coast to coast and in between, Midwest, East Coast, West Coast, everyone got together. And we had a conference discussing what is the biggest thing on your mind as a community leader. And the number one thing, 2 things that emerged very clearly. Number one, The first and primary concern on the minds of every leader in the community, coast to coast, and this is also true in the United Kingdom and Europe and beyond, is youth participation. Will young people be here? Because we're already seeing declining numbers. Will there be anyone in these Husainiyas, in these Imam Bargas in 10, 15, 20 years, or will they be abandoned? What is our plan? And number two, one of the biggest issues that we are facing that we are not addressing is the mental health of our world, and our youth especially. Believe me, these two things have come together at the highest level. If you remember my Majalis of the past, and I'm no foreigner to this community, you know me and I know you. You know that industrial economies, as society develops, in economic industrial economies of the last 100 years, we have many benefits. We have the best hospitals in history. We have the best businesses in terms of economic progress, at least in history. We are the wealthiest in history. However, we are not the happiest in history. What's going on? There's many benefits. You wouldn't want to live in any other era in history, by the way. It wasn't much better. But we've had so much progress, but there have been side effects. Remember, you go to your doctor. When you go to your doctor, the doctor says you have cholesterol. You have cholesterol, the doctor says you take this medicine, you eat the medicine, it will help your cholesterol, but it may give you other side effects. It may give you dry mouth, it may give you fatigue, it may give you something like this, side effect. It solves one problem, but it creates another problem. Similarly, as societies are like this, you may have some problems that you solve, but there's other problems that emerge. In industrial economies, something terrible happens to the mind. People become very unhappy. If you remember my studies in the past that I've shared with you, in industrial economies, in East and West, in America as well as in South Korea, as the rate of industrialization increases, the rate of suicide also increases. That is self-harm. Now, stay with me. This is very important. You may think this is someone else's problem. I remember it was 9 weeks ago. I was standing in Masjid Al-Hayy in Orlando, Florida. It's a beautiful masjid. I recommend you all see it. It's over a $20 million project. You feel very happy as a Shia follower of the Ahlul Bayt when you see a masjid like this. I was standing in front of the congregation giving the Jum'ah khutbah. And in the second khutbah of Jum'ah, you are told to discuss current affairs, what's going on in our world. And oftentimes in current affairs, we discuss what's going on abroad. However, in current affairs, we must also discuss what's going on here. And I said at that time that in my studies and the research that I've come across, the rate of suicide, self-harm, taking one's life in the African American young male demographic, young African American men are taking their lives at the highest rates ever, skyrocketing rates. That means they would rather not live than live in the world that exists right now. And I said at that time that we may need to raise a voice because Allah may ask me on the day of judgment that you were living in America at that time. Did you speak for this oppressed minority, for example? And I said at that time that it may be an African American boy today, but tomorrow it may be today it's a young black boy, tomorrow it may be a young brown boy or a young brown girl. Believe me, Allah is my witness. Perhaps 7 weeks had not passed. 7 weeks did not pass. I was standing in front of the same jama'at, the same congregation in the masjid, and I said, look, that day that I told you about has come. Stanford University in California needs no introduction. Stanford, Harvard, they go back and forth, 1 and 2, 1 and 2. The best university in America. Stanford University put out a study looking at the rates of suicide in America in July of 2020, just 2 months ago. The study looked at the rates of suicide amongst demographics, the Jewish community, the Catholic Christian community, the Protestant Christian community, and the Muslim community. What did their data find? Please pay close attention. The data found that according to the researchers at Stanford University, the rate of attempted suicide in America amongst the Jewish community was 3.6%. 3.6%, under 4%, 3.6%. In the Protestant Christian community, the rate was 5%. In the Protestant community, it was 5%. In the Catholic Christian community, it was 6%. The researchers at Stanford University said the rate of attempted suicide amongst Muslims in America was 7.9%, 8%, the highest. But it's not done yet. They adjusted for other factors. When they adjusted for other factors, the researchers at Stanford said that the rate of attempted suicide amongst young Muslims in America was 2 times the amount of the Catholic Christian community. 12% versus 6%. Double. Now stay with me. Industrial economies lead to unhappiness, high rates of suicide. Within the Muslim community, the most marginalized community right now is the Muslim community. Your children, our children. What are we doing about it? Because there's 2 problems here. One, it's a tragedy to lose the life. But remember what I said. What did the Imam say? Hifzuddin wa hifzuddima. Preserving the faith and preserving the faithful. We need to protect our next generation. And on top of that, in Christianity as well as in Islam, you are not allowed to take your life in this way. So we need to protect our children from this as well. The same way we would protect them from alcohol, we need to protect them. Now, when it comes to mental health related issues, this is a challenge and a problem that has a biological aspect to it, a physiological aspect to it, a psychological aspect to it. Oftentimes in our Imam Bargas and our Husainiyas, people say, oh, I'm feeling down, I'm feeling depressed. Read this dua, it will solve the problem. If someone breaks their hand, you don't do that. You say that go to the doctor, make sure you get treatment and make sure you have everything in place, and then do dua. For example, we're living in a world of COVID. You don't say that, okay, I'm just going to do dua. You have to wear a mask, you have to sanitize your hands, you have to keep social distancing. Similarly, when we come to mental health related issues, you and I must understand that there is one aspect, which is the dua, which is on its side and is important. But at the same time, we must not neglect the pharmacology, we must not neglect the behavioral therapies, we must not forget this. What am I saying? What I'm saying is we need to make sure that we are taking care of our next generation. It is not easy being a young Muslim in America today. Believe me. Many of us, many of the elders, many of the people who came here, they came from environments like India or Pakistan, or for example, Iraq, or for example, Iran, where they had a culture, they had a community, and that helped to give rise to their belief system. And you've heard the old saying, it takes a village to raise a child. And some of you got that village. But in this society, sometimes we don't have that village to give rise to that young person. You're going through all these thoughts and these ideas. It's very difficult. This is one set of data. The next set of data that I want to share with you. San Francisco State University. I say this why? Because we recommend and we tell our youth and our children to become the most educated, to go to the top universities, become the top doctors, lawyers, engineers, economists. It's wonderful, it's beautiful. If followers of Babe Madinatul Ilm don't do this, who will? It's wonderful. But at the same time, we are noticing the caliber of the questions are getting more complicated. We need to make sure we keep up the religious dialogue with that. Otherwise, we will lose our next generations. San Francisco State University put out a study. They asked young Muslims in America, they said a few things. Number one, how many of you try to avoid telling others you're Muslim? You know, you're going to school, you're going to university. How many of you avoid telling other people you're Muslim? Number one. Number two, how many of you, in terms of can you be Muslim and American, what's the answer? Is there a contradiction here? Can you be Muslim or American? How many of you think yes or no? At the third level, how many of you, if someone said you're a Muslim, you would deny you're a Muslim? You'd say, I'm not a Muslim. The data is very enlightening. They said at the first level, 1 in 3, 33% of young Muslims in America said they would try to avoid telling someone they're a Muslim. Avoid. If they could go around it, they would say, avoid the topic, number one. Number two, 1 out of 2, 50% of young Muslims were not able to tell if they can be American and Muslim. What are we doing here? They weren't sure if they can be American and Muslim. They thought it was a contradiction. 50% were unsure. That means we haven't explained the history of Islam in America. Do you know when Keith Ellison, the congressman from Minnesota, the Muslim congressman from Minnesota, when he went to be sworn in Washington, D.C. as the congressman, at that point in time, you have to swear in on a book. Typically, people swear in on the Bible, but you don't have to. He said, I'm not a Christian, I'm a Muslim, Keith Ellison says. I want to swear in on the Quran. And they accommodated that for him. They went and got a Quran for him. But which Quran did they get for Keith Ellison? They went to the Library of Congress, the largest library in the world in Washington, D.C., and they went and got a Quran that was over 200 years old, and it belonged to Thomas Jefferson, the one who wrote the Declaration of Independence, the one who was one of the founding fathers of America. Meaning what? He was reading the Quran then. In fact, the debate took place over 200 years ago in America. Can a Muslim be the president of the United States over 200 years ago? And all of the founding fathers said, yes, categorically a Muslim can be the president of the United States. There's no contradiction. The Constitution of the United States has nothing, there's nothing in the Constitution of the United States that contradicts Islam. In fact, why was Thomas Jefferson reading the Quran? Because Thomas Jefferson was a thinker, he was a reader. Thomas Jefferson was a lawyer. So he was reading the Bible, the Old Testament, the Torah, the Injil, the Bible, and he was reading the Quran in order to derive laws for this newly formed country. Therefore, Islam has been part and parcel of the development of America from the beginning. In fact, they say tort law in America was influenced by Islamic law. The civil laws were impacted by Islamic law. You see, but if you don't know this, then you think, oh, Islam and Americanism and American identity are at odds. No. So the second level, we need to answer this. The third level, the researchers at San Francisco State University came forward and said, 1 in 6 young Muslims, if someone said they are a Muslim, they would deny it. They would say, no, I'm not a Muslim. What are we doing about this? You see, the vulnerability, it's not easy to be a young Muslim. Allow me to explain. Everywhere I go, I was just in California, in Los Angeles for the first 10 days of Muharram, and everywhere I go, there's always this question, especially from the sisters. Remember, we as brothers, oftentimes we blend in. The issue of hijab. First of all, we have not explained hijab appropriately. Hijab, we think hijab, for example, is this idea of just a scarf or a chadar, and that's important. I'm not saying anything about that. But what I'm saying is this. Hijab applies to both genders, male and female, number one. It's a concept, both are to lower their gaze. It's the modesty in how you carry yourself, number one. Number two, we have conflated or confused the scarf with the concept of hijab. And it's very important to realize that both are important. But at the same time, men also have a hijab. From for example, the navel to the knees. They're supposed to do that. They're not supposed to wear tight clothes. They're supposed to wear loose clothes. This has also been mentioned. We don't do that. The University of Hawaii put out a study that was looking at that said, what is the most prominent indicator of someone's faith, someone's religion in America today? They found two things were the biggest identifiers. Number 2 on the list was the turban that our Sikh friends wear. You know the Sikh friends who go to the Gurdwara? You know, we are not at odds with Sikhism. We are not at odds with Hinduism. We are not at odds with Christianity. We are not at odds with Judaism. We are all at odds with Jahl. That's our common enemy. Ignorance. Why? Because when somebody went to Wisconsin and shot up the Gurdwara a few years ago in Wisconsin, they weren't shooting them thinking they were Sikhs. They were shooting them thinking they were Muslims. Because that person had ignorance and did not know that someone who wears a turban is not just a Muslim, but that person could also be Sikh. We need to build bridges with the Sikh community and other communities, the Jewish community, the Christian community, because we people of faith are all in the boat together. Today, in Wisconsin, or last year or a few years ago, that's happening to a Sikh. Tomorrow they may come to an alim of ours who's wearing an amama. We need to build these bridges with other communities. They said number 2 on the list was the turban that Sikhs wear. Number 1 on the list was the hijab that Muslim sisters wear. The number 1 clearest indicator of someone's faith in America today is when they wear a scarf. So the sister asked, why? Why the hijab? If you go to Los Angeles, outside of the city, or right at the edge of the city, there is a museum. It is called the Getty. The Getty is a very renowned museum. And in that museum, if you go inside, which I invite you to do, you will find a marble sculpture of a lady, a bust of a lady that goes from her shoulder upwards. And it is 400 plus years old, from the Italian era, from Italy. The lady is not a Muslim, but she's wearing full hijab, full scarf. And the inscription describing what is going on in the sculpture says, this lady is wearing a full scarf and full covering because this was a sign of nobility, honor, and piety. But we've not explained that. We've not made it clear. I am waiting for that moment in time where we inculcate in every sister, and I'm not only talking about sister, brothers as well, that courage and that confidence of Tawakkul Karman, the Nobel laureate, the lady who won the Nobel Prize, wearing full hijab. A few years ago, when she won the Nobel Prize wearing full hijab, the whole global media came forward and said, Tawakkul Karman, you have won the Nobel Prize. You are at the peak of modern civilization, and you are wearing a scarf? Is this not regressive? Is this not backwards? Her response still baffles me. She looked right back at the journalists and she said, when mankind emerged on this planet, mankind used to wear very little clothes. But as the intellect began to develop, man began to wear more clothes. Therefore, the scarf that I have on my head, it represents the culmination of the human intellect. To remove it would be to go back to the Stone Age once again. Who has that confidence to be able to say that on that global stage? This is something we need to inculcate. But I want to stop here and I want to pause here and share one thing with you. This is very key. Us brothers often blend in. When you ask a sister, we need to be very compassionate. I, as a brother sitting here before you, I cannot 100% empathize with what it's like to be a sister wearing hijab in society today because I don't live it. I don't live it because I don't have to wear that physically. But a sister does. Believe me, when you ask sisters today, they face at least two or more pressures. Internal pressure and external pressure, meaning what? External pressure is when you wear the hijab, you go down the street in downtown Kansas City, in downtown Chicago, you go down the street wearing the hijab, you have to hear comments from people till this day saying, you know, you don't have to wear that here. Meaning what? As if implying that she's being oppressed, that she is being forced to wear it. So I have to respond, the sister has to respond to the people externally. But then when you come to the mosque and the masjid and the Husainiya, you have to respond to the internal aspects. Meaning what? Maybe one hair is showing, maybe the hijab is not perfect, then someone else is gossiping and saying, oh, the hijab is not right. Or for example, the clothes are too tight. They're not looking at the hijab. The sister's trying, but we demoralize the person. Number two. Number three, believe me, youth have come to me and said, we want to do hijab, or we began doing hijab, but the first opposition that we faced was our own family. You know, some people, unfortunately, sometimes they're so insecure, not they have to wear hijab. They cannot even tolerate someone in their vicinity wearing hijab. How will we build confidence in the society? How will we build confidence? Believe me, but don't even go here. You know us brothers, and one of the traits to be successful in life, this is the key, my next generation especially. If you want to be successful in life, the key is to be brutally honest with yourself. Identify your weaknesses. Allama Tabatabai in his final moments, muraqaba, muhasaba. His final moments, a man saves his last moments, his last breaths in order to preserve the most valuable thing, the most valuable advice. Imam Ali in his final moments, he says, Allah, Allah fil Quran. Allah, 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 point of emphasis. Allah, Allah fil aitam. Allah, Allah fil masakin. By Allah, the Quran. By Allah, the orphans. By Allah, the poor. Do not neglect them. Do not forget them. Allama Tabatabai in his final moments, he says, do not forget and do not neglect that at the end of the day, you analyze yourself, your nafs. What did I do right? What did I do wrong? What could I do better? How can I improve? Was my day today better than yesterday? And will my tomorrow be better than today? Am I constantly improving? Each individual needs to do this individually, and we also need to do this at the community level, at the societal level. Believe me, if the brothers had to wear the hijab the way some of the sisters do, they would not. What's the dalil? What's the proof? Many of our maulanas, when they are standing outside in these walls, they will wear the amama. Outside these walls, they will not wear the imama. They've told me themselves. We go to the grocery store, we don't wear it. We go to the airport, we don't wear it. We go here, there, the other place, we don't wear it. Why? Because you know people are going to look at you a particular way. So why don't we support our sisters? Or why do we have this double standard where we are biased in that regard? We must support them. The fiqh perspective, according to our ulama, it is follow your marja in that regard. I'm just trying to say, let's be more compassionate. Because what's happening in our globe, because wherever I go, from coast to coast and across the pond in the United Kingdom, we are seeing an environment where our sisters, not some sisters who used to wear hijab are now leaving hijab. It's happening. It's very easy for me to come forward and someone to come forward and say, you're wrong and this is bad. No, we need to try to put ourselves in the feet of that sister and see how difficult it is for her and be compassionate. It's not easy being a Muslim today. These pressures add up. And when these pressures add up, it becomes like a pressure cooker and it spills over. And then eventually people leave the religion. Believe me, with my hand on my heart, I have to deal with the situations of youth in our communities from coast to coast who come from good families, good communities. They go off to college. Someone became an atheist. Someone became a Sunni. Someone became a Christian. What are you and I doing about this? I'm not trying to fear. Tomorrow, inshallah, we will cover some of the solutions, some of the things that we can start doing in order to protect the mindset and the confidence and build up our next generation so they are stronger believers than you and I. But that's a conversation for another day. You see, when we come to the movement of Sayyid al-Shuhada, when we come to the movement of Imam al-Husain, Imam Sajjad, after Karbala, when he comes back to Medina, they ask Imam Sajjad, they said, what was the most difficult calamity you faced? What was the most difficult thing? He saw Sayyid al-Shuhada, he saw his brothers being martyred, he saw all the difficulties. But what does he say? Asham, Asham, Asham. Why Sayyid al-Sajjad? Because what did he see? He saw his sisters, he saw his aunts, he saw his mothers, those respected ladies having to go through such a difficult time. That means what hijab was in the eyes of Sayyid al-Sajjad is a totally different world than what it is in my eyes. And when that was violated, Sajjad's heart broke. We are the followers of Ahlul Bayt. Ajrukum ala Allah. I won't take much of your time tonight. According to the narrations, we are told that after the tragedy of Karbala, we are told that Imam Sajjad, when he got back to Medina, he would never go to any gatherings, any joyous gatherings. We are told a man comes to Imam Sajjad, he says, Yabna Rasulillah, tomorrow it is the happiest day of my life. My child is getting married, it is their wedding. I would be honored if you would attend the gathering. I would be honored if you blessed the gathering, that you would come and attend. At that moment in time, the Imam says that after Karbala, after this tragedy, we don't attend these gatherings. We don't go to these gatherings after Karbala. He said, Yabna Rasulullah, it would be the greatest honor. The dignitaries will be there, and you are the greatest of dignitaries. We would want you to be there. The Imam said that perhaps if you had a majlis for my father, perhaps if you had the zikr of the martyrdom of my father, perhaps I would attend. At that moment, he said, I will make sure that it is done. At that moment, when the day of the wedding came, according to the narrations, at that moment, the man had put out a chair. When he had put out a chair, he had put that chair for Imam Sajjad. And when the day began and the wedding began, he had a zakir and a reciter to come to the front and to begin to recite the musibah of Imam al-Husain. At that moment in time when the musibah begins, this man, he's looking in the crowd. When he's looking in the crowd, he does not see the Imam. He does not see the Imam in the seat that he had designated for the Imam. He then goes out into the street, and when he goes out to the street in the entrance, he notices that the Imam is standing by the shoes of the attendees. He says, Yabna Rasulillah, I placed a chair for you inside. I had a dignitary seat for you. Why do you not come inside? The Imam looks back at him and he says that when these people came in the beginning, they were your guests. But as soon as you had the recitation of the musibah of my father, they became the azadars. They became the mourners of my father. Ajrukum ala Allah. Imam Sajjad would always make the arrangements for the Majlis of Sayyid al-Shuhada at every moment. The narrations say that whenever Imam Sajjad would go through the bazaar, when he would go through the bazaar, in any time there was a butcher shop, a butchery, they would close their shop, they would cover their shop, they would make sure Imam Sajjad does not see. But one time there was a circumstance where there was a man who was not able to close his butchery, he was not able to cover his meat. At that moment in time, Imam Sajjad came forward and he caught the man. He said, oh butcher, can you answer something for me? He says, Yabna Rasulullah, what is it? He says that these animals that you slaughtered, did you feed them before you slaughtered them? He says, Yabna Rasulullah, we are Muslims, we are the followers of La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, we feed them. He says, do you give them water? He says, yes. Yabna Rasulullah, we give them water. He says, one last question, do you make sure when you slaughter the animals, there are no other animals nearby? Do you make sure they are away from the other animals. He says, Bala ya ibn Rasulillah, we make sure we do all of this. Imam turns towards Karbala. He says, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Salams be upon you, my father. They didn't give you any food, no water, and they slaughtered you in front of your own family. Ajrukum ala Allah, ajrukum ala Allah. May Allah accept your ibadah. This masaib and the musibah of Ali Muhammad, this is one of the shifa. My dear young ones, never forget the masaib of Ahlul Bayt. They will help you in the most difficult time. The narrations say, final narrations that I will give you, and I won't take much more of your time. The narrations say that when Imam Sajjad, when he left from Sham, they were going back towards Medina. When they were going back towards Medina, there came a moment in time where there was a fork in the road, and Imam Sajjad goes to Bibi Zainab, and he says, my aunt Zainab, one road goes to Karbala, one road goes to Medina. Where do you want to go? Bibi Zainab says, Sajjad, take me to Karbala. I want to see my brother Husain. They go towards Karbala, but when they go towards Karbala, we are told in the narrations, from one side comes Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, and from the other side Imam Sajjad is coming. Jabir is that companion who was close to Rasulullah. He had lost his eyesight. Imagine you see a friend, imagine you see a comrade, imagine you see a loved one after many years, after many times and many days. The first comrade that Imam Sajjad had seen was Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari. When you meet someone after you have gone through a tragedy, you tell them what went through your heart. You tell them what difficulty happened. Imam Sajjad and Jabir hugged one another. Imam Sajjad says, Jabir, be light on me, because the shackles, they have cut into my skin. At that moment, Jabir says, Yabna Rasulullah, what happened in Karbala? What happened in Kufa? What happened in Sham? Imam began to tell Jabir, who knows what he said, but he may have said to him that, oh Jabir, do you know that on the 10th of Muharram, my brother Ali Akbar, he came to my father, and in his final moments, he asked my father for some water. My father did not have any water to give him. He put a ring in his mouth and he sent him back to the battlefield. Jabir, do you know what it's like for a father to not be able to grant the last request of his son before his eyes? Ajrukum ala Allah. He may have said, Jabir, do you know that for 3 days my father did not get any ghusl and he did not get any kafan? Jabir, do you know on the 3rd day, through the ajaz of imamat, through the mu'jiz of imama, I showed up and I told Banu Asad, I said, this is the body of Qasim. I said, this is the body of Aun and Muhammad. This is the body of Abul Fadl al-Abbas. Jabir, do you know that I took my father's body, and do you know that I laid my brother Ali Akbar by the feet of my father? No, Jabir, do you know that I took my 6-month-old brother Ali Az-Zahra and I put him on the chest of my father? Jabir, I buried them. Jabir, do you know that when we were in Sham, my 4-year-old sister Sakina, I buried her with my own hands, Jabir. Ajrukum ala Allah. Ajrukum ala Allah. At that moment in time, we are told, you know, when you and I, when we have a loved one, may Allah protect your families. May Allah protect your loved ones. Do you know that there's a moment, according to the narrations, when Imam Sajjad buried Imam al-Husain alayhi salam, he took his finger and he wanted to write something on the grave. When you and I, when we write something on the grave of our loved one, what do we write? We write what's going through our heart. The beloved father, the father who loved us so much, the father who was always there for us, the father who built this community, the father who did this and the father who did that. Do you know what was going through the heart of Imam Sajjad? What did he write on the grave with the finger of Imam al-Husayn? He wrote, هَذَا قَبْرُ حُسَيْن الَّذِي قَتَلُوهُ عَطْشَانًا. This is the grave of Husayn who was killed while he was thirsty. This is the grave of Husain who was killed while he was thirsty. Ajrukum ala Allah. One final narration, and I won't take any more of your time. Imam Sajjad came to Jabir and he says, Jabir, I did all of these things, but Jabir, do you know what broke my heart? He says, Yabna Rasulullah, what broke your heart? He says, on Sham Ghariban, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, he ordered for 10 horsemen to trample over the bodies. When he ordered for the this to happen, there were tribesmen who were there who said, we will not let you trample over the bodies of our tribesmen. They began to remove the bodies. Jabir, only one body remained, the body of the son of Fatima Az-Zahra. Jabir, I heard the hooves of the horses breaking the bones of my father under the hooves of the horses. Jabir, do you know what it's like for a son to hear his father's bones breaking and not being able to do anything to help him? Sallallahu alayka ya Rasul Allah. Sallallahu alayka ya Amir al-Mu'minin. Sallallahu alayki ya Fatima Az-Zahra Sayyidat al-Nisa al-Alamin. Sallallahu alayka ya Hasan al-Mujtaba. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. معتم حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين.
खड़ी है शाम का दरबार है, तेरी ज़ैनब खड़ी है शाम का दरबार है। आलमे गुरबत में आले अहमदे मुख्तार है, अब ना लश्कर है ना अब्बा से